I'm Bruce Apar, and this is Frank J. Rich, and you're watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog is brought to you by Chase Media Group, provider of multimedia marketing solutions for an omni-channel marketplace, and also publisher of The Penny Saver. And we thank our CEO, Carla Chase, and my co-host, Frank J. Rich, for putting us up on the show and for coming into your living room's den, smartphone, however you might be watching us. And you could watch us on YouTube by searching for Town Link TV or NCN Local TV, and you'll see all the past shows. Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog is a community affairs program where we like to bring you people of interest and of special accomplishment and people who are contributing to the community in unique ways that we feel you'd like to know about and that we want you to know about. And on this show, we are really honored to have Neil Gross and his wife, Sandy. Neil is the chapter commander of Chapter 21 of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, and he has a lot more affiliations and a lot more titles that I think would use up all 30 minutes, Neil, if we went through them. But this is very timely because you're going around and through the chapter, right, and through the Military Order of the Purple Heart, you've been having names, I should say towns in New York State named as Purple Heart towns, right? The most recent one, I believe, was Yorktown, where we all happen to be from. But why don't you tell us about what the significance of that is, having towns named Purple Heart towns?
I believe that being an educator for almost 40 years, I see a lot of value in making sure that children today
just talk to us.
Okay. That children today understand that all that we have in this country, all the freedoms we have and the democracy we live in, is certainly not something they should take for granted.
And I know you have a phrase that I've heard you say at presentations: "Freedom is not free." Right?
Absolutely. I usually begin every time I speak to anyone. I always remind them that freedom is not free.
And by the way, what do you mean by that?
I mean that we have what we have in this country because of the sacrifices men and women have made to this, for our freedoms. No matter where our country sends us, our men and women go there and they serve valiantly, but inevitably they are sacrificing their time, their lives, and unfortunately their lives, and of course many come back wounded and hurting. Right. And that's what we're all about.
And you don't want, none of us, but in saying freedom is not free, I know you don't want anybody to take their freedom for granted.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
As far as our movement to have the towns and cities named, Westchester County is now a Purple Heart town. We've seen the proclamation. I'm waiting for Rob Astorino to make a formal proclamation. Putnam County is also a Purple Heart county.
Right.
Somers on August 1st was named a Purple Heart town. The city of Newburgh, the city of Peekskill, and now I'm very proud of the town of Yorktown, thanks to Michael Grace and Vishnu Patel and Eugene Lang, one of my
we should say for the people watching all over, Michael Grace is a supervisor, and Vishnu Patel is a councilman.
And a councilman. These guys worked very, very hard once they understood what we were about, and to make sure that our town was a Purple Heart town. We spent a lot of time, my chapter and the other veterans organizations spent a lot of time, a lot of effort working in Montrose VA, okay, the Castle Point VA, and even as far south as the Bronx VA, trying to make sure that the veterans get what they need, okay, when they come back. Today, my driving force right now is to help my veterans who are coming back, our veterans who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. When I came home from Vietnam in 1970, I went. My wife and my mother picked me up at the airport. threw me in my the Volkswagen microbus and brought me back up to Putnam Valley, and that was the end of it. Okay, I went home, directly home.
So like, let's say, for example, on the ride home, Sandy, did Neil talk about anything regarding his experiences?
No, he really
Not
didn't.
at all. And
No.
did you ask him?
At that point, no.
No,
I
okay,
think we
right.
all were waiting for him to feel comfortable
Right.
speaking about it.
To
and it was
volunteer
just
the
welcome
information,
home,
right.
and we were filling him in on what
Right.
was doing at home.
And did he seem to you on appearance or in behavior different in any way? or-
No, not at that
Oh,
point.
okay.
It was just really excited to be home, and
Right.
it was new and different, and then just reacquainting yourself with the
Right.
scenery and people again.
Right. And of course, since you came to the set and we were preparing, it turns out Frank was in Vietnam at the same time, or
Same time, same unit.
Yeah.
Same division.
Right.
Absolutely amazing.
And so, the purpose of naming towns Purple Heart towns is to give due recognition to the
yes,
whole Purple
and
Heart.
yes, but I
process.
envision this. I envision your children and your children's children, okay, coming by a statue or a monument, okay, or a sign that just says, we're a Purple Heart town, and asking the parents, what does that mean? What is that all about? What makes us a Purple Heart town? And I want parents to be able to say to their children, yes, for all the sacrifices men and women have made, okay, to keep our country free. So they understand that freedom is not free. That's what the purpose is. I certainly don't need any more medals. I have plenty of medals.
Right.
Okay.
And when you say that about the parents need to remind their children about that, it's regardless of whether somebody has a Purple Heart or not, if they served simply. But what earns somebody a Purple Heart?
In 1782, August 7th, by the way, 1782, General Washington had to find something to give his troops for all they suffered and all their work and their hard effort, okay, to win the war. And he decided on a badge of merit, a little purple piece of purple cloth, okay, that said merit on it. And what that symbolizes is a sacrifice. Today, all families of all our troops who lose their lives in any conflict get a Purple Heart posthumously. All of us who are wounded, okay, in enemy contact, all receive a Purple Heart, and that's our symbol, okay, of our sacrifice. But certainly, all veterans sacrifice, no matter whether they have a Purple Heart or not. And I'm most absolutely pleasantly pleased, not pleasantly pleased, ecstatic about the amount of support I've gotten from the American Legion, the VFW, the DAV. The Vietnam Veterans of America, all these organizations have been 100% behind what we're doing. And when I was at the ceremony a couple of days ago in Yorktown, naming Yorktown a Purple Heart town, standing behind me was a whole contingent of American Legionnaires,
Right.
and I was so proud to be with them. I think that we really need to reinforce the importance of teaching our children
Right.
about what they have and how grateful they should be. For those of us who have traveled the world, okay, we know that this country is very special.
Right.
And we must make sure that what we have is safeguarded, and we don't ever lose sight of that. And that's the whole idea behind that. And my next drive is to rename the Tappan Zee Bridge, the Purple Heart Memorial Bridge. My state commander, Willie Nazario, and I are working, and with other chapter commanders and with other politicians, okay, to make sure that that happens. Not for us, not for our aggrandizement, but for our children and our children's children, so they remember what's been going on.
Neil, a quick question. What
Yeah.
qualifies a town as a Purple Heart town?
A proclamation. That's all it is. That's all it is. I had a wonderful.
So basically, we're communicating a sensitivity to the sacrifices that
Exactly.
men and women make
Exactly.
on behalf of the freedom.
And I
of
think at
country.
this, you're absolutely right, Frank. And at this point in time, with what's happening in Afghanistan now, and our troops who are coming home, okay, with all the myriad of issues that they have, same issues that I had when I came back from Vietnam, now is the time to wake this country up, that we must care for our veterans. We must spend the monies that need to be spent. We must spend the time and effort that we need to spend to make sure they're cared for when they come home. That they just aren't just dumped on their doorstep and said thanks for the service and goodbye. Mm-hmm. That they need services when they come home.
Yeah. There is an issue today, we may not talk more about than just briefly mentioning, which suggests a certain bicameralism on the part of the American people, where we recognize to some limited extent the sacrifice that our men and women in the armed forces have
Right.
made, and the significant effect that that kind of duty has on someone. the mindset that allows someone to walk into the breach of danger, knowing that there's a possibility they won't survive it, a good possibility, a sort of internal recognition that's a little hard to transfer to another person, and then return to a country that has significant issues facing it, and a divided nation from an ethical and a political point of view. So there's a bicameralism in America that people are struggling with. This is not the great generation. This is not the land that we used to know for many, many reasons. And the social context is having its way with us, so to speak. Sure. How do you reconcile those two things, and without making the show into that? But,
well, no, it's a very good point. And I'll state my personal view. I'm certainly not in favor of our conflict in Iraq or Afghanistan. I am not. I apologize for that. I don't share the same belief that other people share about that. That's a way to stop terrorism from coming to our shores. Mm-hmm. However, I recognize that these men and women who are over there are our boys, our men, our women, our children, our sons and our daughters. Okay, and we would do a tremendous disservice, not to them so much as to ourselves, if we don't care for them while they're there, okay, and care for them when they come home, for as long as it takes. Because that's where it is bicameral. Part of me says we shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be fighting. I don't want to see another American soldier or Marine die, okay, in those conflicts. However, I will support them to the death, okay, to make sure that they care for it when they come home.
And how is that working out? I'm sorry, we're going when they do come home, and we can, touch on your own experience, which happened, I think it was like 30 or 40 years later,
ago,
right? But is enough being done when they come home, and once they get home and they're settled in, and the ongoing care that they need?
There's certainly not enough being done. There are efforts, however, to help. Okay. Here's what happens. We've drained our resources to the point where we have reservists and National Guardsmen and women serving multiple tours. When they come home, they land on Stewart or nearby here, and they salute their commanding officer, and they go home over and over again. We had an example of a young lady who was a teacher in Yonkers who committed suicide. A teacher, you'd think an educated person, okay, but yet she had served multiple tours. We don't know why she ended her life, but she didn't get the care she needed. When you're a regular Army soldier today on posts all around this country, people are committing suicide over and over again. Why? Because they're not being cared for. What happens is the hand is out there, okay, saying, well, you can get VA services at the Veterans Administration, but nobody's taking them into their arms and saying, listen, can we help you? Can we do anything for you? There are organizations like the Chase Bank, for instance, okay, I know has a completely fantastic campaign right now, okay, to hire veterans. So is Walmart and other organizations.
Yeah, there is a movement.
That's right.
Yes, there is
to
a
hire
movement,
because their joblessness
right.
leads to, if you're jobless, I know I was jobless for about a month when I came home. Wow, that was terrible. I didn't have anything to do. I didn't have any way to make money. And luckily enough, I didn't have a family. But can you imagine coming home to have a family?
You became a teacher, by the way, we
Absolutely.
should point out.
Became
and
a
then
teacher.
And then
sure.
a principal.
And a principal, sure.
Right.
And I led a normal life thanks to this young lady.
Right.
And she helped me, my family helped me, my brothers and sisters, and I have seven brothers and sisters, my father and mother. They were with me all the way. Right. Some of these people come home and nobody's there to ask them, how are you feeling? What's going on? Can we help you? And that's why we have drug abuse. I have friends of mine, okay, who belong to my chapter, who came home and they got caught up in drugs. They got caught up in their job. They lost their jobs. They lost their homes. I mean, this is a horrible situation. This shouldn't happen in today's day and age.
Right.
Why? Because we're not doing enough to care for all of our soldiers, especially our guardsmen and our reservists, okay, and the people who are still in the regular Army. They're not being cared for. And that's another reason for these monuments, to awaken this nation to the point where we're going to do something, actively do something every day to make sure our veterans are cared for.
Right. And in terms of your experience in Vietnam and what led to your being awarded the Purple Heart, you're saying that you were part of a battalion that was ambushed after only 5 days that you were
Yeah,
there, right?
that was
You were there 5 days.
5 days. Luckily enough, I was.
And you were put in charge of the platoon.
Yeah, I was.
Right.
I came over. I was an E5. That's a buck sergeant, and I was made immediately platoon sergeant because there was nobody else to be platoon sergeant.
Right.
And we were out on in the Michelin rubber plantation near Lyke, and
So that's where Michelin grew rubber for.
that's right.
For the
huge.
I lived
That's
in the middle of it.
That's a whole other story we
Right,
can tell you
sure,
about.
yeah.
We were told not to destroy the trees, in artillery strikes. But anyway, that's another story. But we were ambushed in the Michelin rubber plantation by a regular NVA Army unit. These guys really had their act together. I mean, they did the right thing. They got us pinned down. And I started out with 32 men.
This was
okay?
Viet Cong you're talking about?
No, these are NVA regulars
Oh, regulars.
with pith helmets
Right.
and khaki uniforms.
Right.
And these guys were coming down through the rubber, and we could see them coming at us, hundreds of them. And we managed to stop their advance with 50 caliber machine guns and M60 machine guns, but it still wasn't enough because there were only like 30 of us and hundreds of them.
Hundreds.
Yeah. And so I got on the radio immediately because I knew the situation was desperate, and I called in Cobra gunships. Blue Max, we used to call them, okay? And they were right overhead, and they laid down a tremendous amount of fire, slowing them up. Then I called in the artillery strikes, okay, which I'll tell you about later on, that cost the government a lot of money. But that stopped them completely. And then by that time, the rest of my company knew where we were, and they got online, and they swept through the area, driving them away. But
And I just want to you read something you had prepared in the way of background that I found very, to say the least, compelling and poignant. When you say, "My steel pot," meaning your helmet, "my steel pot was blown off my head by a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG, and you felt the warmth of blood oozing down your face." And then you say, "I was too involved in keeping myself and my men alive that I had to ignore this. I had incurred head wounds and shrapnel in my forehead, lips, cheeks, nose, neck, and ears." And then it's this next line that really says something. "God must have been with me because nothing was in my eyes." And I happen to know, as a fellow congregant, that both you and Sandy are extremely involved in what happens to be, in our case, the Yorktown Jewish Center. So, I mean, would you say your faith was reinforced by that kind of experience?
there were many things that happened to me in that year I was spent in Vietnam that reinforced my faith in God, and I do believe very strongly in our religion and what we do. And thanks to Rabbi Zerbis and Sternstein, they also have made me feel their warmth and their
Right.
love. And
Right.
that day, nothing. How can it possibly be everywhere in my face and in my lips? Okay,
And
I was
that,
picking
yeah.
out pieces of shrapnel, nothing in my eyes. Isn't that amazing?
Right.
Really incredible.
And that's what led right to the Purple Heart, that you were more concerned about saving your men than,
Well,
than what
yeah,
was happening
that's-
to you at the time.
I think at the time that was I know that was the most compelling factor of what I was doing that day, because I was everywhere at the same time, making sure that they were laying down a base of fire, they were okay. The people who were wounded were pulled back okay to an LZ where they could be picked up by medevac. It wasn't that excitement and that movement. Okay, it made me forget about what had happened to me because I was
Right.
still moving. I had all my body parts. I kept going.
Right. And you also awarded the Bronze Star and the Combat Infantryman's Badge.
Right.
For what you did that day.
Yeah.
And then how much longer were you in Vietnam after that?
That was, almost 11 months more. And I stayed with the 1st Infantry Division. I did a long stint out in the what was called a free fire zone. That's where they removed most of all of the civilians. So anything that moved in those areas, you could shoot at.
Right.
That made me feel good because some kids were around and families around. That the horrors I can imagine my father must have felt in Germany. Okay, with so many civilians around and the civilian casualties. So working in the free fire zones, I worked there for 87 days. I was out in the field for 87 straight days, out in the field, and that was tedious, hard, and we lost men every once in a while with heavy contact, but it went fast. Like when they blended
Right.
into another.
Right.
And
And then you were also saying, Neil, that you were basically in the vanguard of troops that went into Cambodia,
That's right.
even at the time, as you pointed out, when the official government statement was, we're not going into Cambodia, right?
I remember Mike Benevento. Mike Benevento was one of my sergeants. I was now then transferred down to the 3rd Brigade, 9th Division. And Mike Benevento, we set up a fire support base, and we were listening to Armed Forces radio. And the president was on the radio, and he said, we have no troops in Cambodia, and some statement like that. And Mike turns to me, and he says, Sarge, where are we? I said, I jokingly took out a map, and I said, I think we're right here. He says, that's Cambodia. I said, the president can say whatever he wants to say, let's put it that way.
Was that Johnson or Nixon?
Nixon,
Nixon
yeah,
at the time,
yeah.
yeah. And so you were the first ground troop into Cambodia,
Yeah.
but you also allude to the atrocities
Oh, yeah.
that you
That was
said,
horrible.
and you say that you and the other men were like crying every day, just having to experience what was going on.
What
right?
was the horror there was, and we saw atrocities in Vietnam, but not to this extent. When we arrived in Mimote, which was in Cambodia, at the crossroads there, they had impaled a Cambodian, must have been a soldier, on a bamboo stake, and they disemboweled him, and there was a sign on it that read something. My interpreter Fong said it was something about him being a traitor, and that was only the first. And then we saw other atrocities along the road. I guess to scare us or to put the fear of God in us, which we already had anyway. And that was my first taste of how inhumane man can be to his fellow man.
War is, yeah.
Horrible.
And of course,
place.
there's the infamous My Lai massacre
Oh,
and
horrible.
Lieutenant Calley. But
Yep.
but was that the only instance of that? I mean, that's the one that is in the history books, really.
People
but
ask me that. It's funny you ask me that,
yeah.
Bruce, because people ask me that all the time. What did I see? And I got to be honest with you. I never saw anyone purposefully or even with any kind of. They would go out of their way to make sure they didn't know when the civilians were hurt.
Right.
I think that I can understand what Calley went through and his men went through, but I certainly would never condone it, and I wouldn't be involved in that.
Right.
I try to preserve life, not take life.
Yeah. And then when you came back, you were saying that you didn't want anything to do
Yeah.
with the military, but yet you went into the National Guard.
It was
So
really, my wife tells the story the best. We were at a birthday party, and as Tom McCarthy, a friend of ours, came up to me and he said, "Hey, I heard you were a combat infantryman." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How would you like to join the National Guard?" And they started to laugh. I said, "National Guard, my sideburns were down to here, my hair was down my back." And I was teaching, and he said, "Come on down to the Armory, Kingsbridge Armory, and
That's right.
and see what it's like, and see if you like it." And I went down, a nice bunch of guys, and it was really good. They gave me an additional rank. They made me a sergeant first class. Who was in the military barely 2 years and becomes a sergeant first class? People spend a whole lifetime. And so I came down, I joined the 42nd Maintenance Battalion, and about 3 years after that, my colonel insisted that I go to OCS, and I became an officer, and I became a commander of the unit I was in, and I went on for the next almost 39 years of service, and I became a lieutenant colonel. I retired a lieutenant colonel.
No,
out
good
of
for
the
you.
reserves. Yeah,
God bless you. Yeah.
I had a very good and rewarding military career because I was able to be a good leader. I think that was it.
And I'm curious too, and I would think maybe some of the people watching, a lot of people, for better or worse, learn history through Hollywood, through Hollywood's eyes. I mean, the movies that pop into my head are Deer Hunter or Born on the 4th of July, or of course Oliver Stone's Platoon. I mean, assuming you've seen one or more of those, are they fairly accurate portrayals of what went on there?
There's only 2 movies. I saw Full Metal Jacket and
Full
other
Metal
movies like
Jacket,
that.
that's
Really,
yeah.
totally non-realistic as far as I'm concerned. The 2 that stick out in my mind are the beginning of Platoon.
Right.
The coming in country, getting acclimatized, and going out there being the new guy. It wasn't called the new guy, it was called the FNG, but being the new guy, okay, on the block. And all of that was actually true, okay? But then I went to get some dental work done in the VA here, Franklin, in Montrose VA. And what I saw in Born on the 4th of July,
Yeah.
okay?
Ron Kovic, right?
Yeah, that's right, and was really very accurate.
Yeah.
I saw men just laying in their own excrement, nobody taking care of them. They didn't pay people well there. My mother, in fact, worked there for a while as an aide. Okay, she didn't work there because she didn't like it. And They weren't taking care of the troops the way they should have been. So I thought that was fairly accurate.
Right.
But most of the other stuff is, nah.
Yeah, fictionalized.
Nice to sell tickets. Yeah.
Right. And we should touch on, I mean, to the degree that you're comfortable talking about it, you know, your experience with PTSD, what was it, 37 or so years later, right? When I mean, what brought it on, do you think, that you began to think of it at that point in ways that were haunting you, right?
I think that my wife probably saw it the most. I mean, she was with me every day. While I was working with Rice City and being a principal in an alternative high school, I was totally involved in what was going on. I would go home at night totally exhausted and pass out. Just go to sleep.
Right.
Not a problem. 2005, because my father was ill, and I spent the last of his 14 months with him. Not almost every day, with him at the Montrose, the New York State Veterans Nursing Home in Montrose. I had time, and I wasn't exhausted every night. So, and I still have a lot of trouble sleeping at night. My wife knows that, and I found myself not so much with flashbacks, but almost like reliving what had gone through. Almost every day was like I was reliving it again. I said, how is this possible? How could something happen 40 years ago? And my therapist, Betty Lindemann over at Montrose, explained it the best. He said, you know, you were totally involved in what you were doing. You were raising a family. You'd worked on summers. You would work day and night, okay? And that ate your energy up, and were able to keep those repressive powers in place. Once I retired, I now had time to think about, maybe I should have done that. Maybe when we were ambushed, I should have done something else. Maybe I could have saved this guy's life and done something different. And I started to second guess all my decisions, okay, especially ones where, you know, lives were lost, and started to blame myself. And I think that that's something that leaders, combat leaders, have to deal with.
Right.
And the help I'm getting, okay, I'm going to probably join a group. They have groups now in Montrose that I'm going to probably join, because on a regular basis. But right now, my best therapist is sitting next to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, then, right, I would say God bless Sandy.
That's the
Thank you
truth.
for that.
There's always a strong woman involved in these things. Well, there's only a couple of minutes left, Neil, but we should just mention that on August 10, a lot of people will be seeing this after that, but even so, the parade in Peekskill with the Grand Marshal, right, Gary?
Biker.
Right, biker. Right.
I think it's important to notice, okay, that I did not, and we did not at the Military Order of the Purple Heart, our chapter, did not promote this parade.
Yeah.
Eugene Perez.
This parade was put together by a consortium of American Legion posts, VFW posts from Westchester, who said it's about time. And it just fell in place. It's going to be a fantastic parade, okay? And I hope everybody listening to the show came to the parade and can say the same thing.
And you should also squeeze in with the little time we have left, just how would somebody order a brick in honor or memory of someone?
Okay, I think that's very important to contact me, okay? And we have, we're putting up a monument. Our first monument is going up at the Cortland Town Hall on Hetty Street, okay? Linda Puglisi, what a fantastic lady.
Yes,
she is incredible. Right. The supervisor of the town of Cortland has been so wonderful to us. She's going to put up our monument, which which is en route soon, okay, to be sent there. And then we're going to line the path with these bricks. And then bricks are extraordinary. I've never seen bricks like these. That allow for the name, okay, and a note, okay, and if you want the Purple Heart emblem, you can have it or not have it. And for $100, you can buy that brick and honor your company, honor your neighbors, honor
And they can email legionpost112 at AOL.com.
They can do that, or
legionpost112.
email me it also.
And where are these bricks placed?
They're going to be a pathway of remembrance up to the monument.
Okay, so they're reusable.
That's right. Oh yes, absolutely. And they're beautiful bricks. And if you don't have to honor a veteran, you can honor your company, you can honor your organization.
Okay,
anyone can buy it.
Anyhow, thank you very much to Neil and Sandy Gross. Thank you for watching. Remember, when Bruce the Block listens, people talk. But much more important, remember what Neil said: freedom is not free. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you so much for
No.
So these bricks are bricks that your organization keeps, or